Because Lorraine has asked the perfect question. Thank you, Lorraine. You couldn't have scripted that better. Where would you go? That's the question that I get asked when I talk about this. Where would you go? And the first thing I would say, Lorraine, and to everybody is don't think of it like right now, all of your life. Okay, I don't know about your circumstances. You might have immigrated. You might have your life already spread over multiple countries. You might have multiple passports. All of my life is in Australia. I was born here. I've lived here most of my life. I've traveled a bit, but I've lived here most of my life. I have an Australian passport. All of my bank accounts are in Australia. My businesses are in Australia. Everything's in Australia. Everything I own, everything I have is in Australia. Now, there's this concept that is recognized in global investment circles called sovereign risk. So if you are a global hedge fund or a global investor, and you're saying, right, are we going to fund a new mine in Australia or are we going to fund a new mine in Namibia, right? One of the many things that they will take into account is which country has the lowest sovereign risk, which country is the least likely to go and expropriating privately owned property, which country is not going to steal our mine. We drop a couple of $1 billion into a mine. Where is the sovereign risk the lowest? Now, that's a well understood concept in sort of global investing terms, but I think this is a concept that we need to start thinking about in terms of our own individual lives. Sovereign risk. When you look at Australia, when you look at the decisions being made, when you look at the direction we're going in, what's being done right now politically, when you consider, for example, the fact that more than half of Australian families are now dependent on government money. Sorry, not families. More than half of Australian households are now dependent on government money to make ends meet. When you comprehend that in a democratic system, how does a politician, how does a political party gain power if they're promising to reduce welfare? They can't. More than half of Australian households are depending on that welfare to make ends meet. It's my opinion, and I hope to be proved wrong, and I'm going to keep fighting tooth and nail. I'm not running out the door and leaving you all, and leaving the country behind and whatever. I'm going to keep fighting because I'm an optimist, and I hope that this can be turned around. But it's very hard to see how it can be turned around when politically it's just not even possible. When more than half of Australian households need that government money, need that welfare money, how do you turn that around politically? How is it possible to get voted in promising to reduce welfare, reduce spending, get the budget balanced, reduce red tape, reduce green tape, be business friendly, etc.? That doesn't get up. Those policies don't get voted for in a world and in a country where you've got that dynamic playing out in the background. So, where would you go? Lorraine, don't think of it as taking your entire life out of this country and placing your entire life into another country, because then you're exposed to exactly the same sovereign risk. You've got now you have to watch this new country like a hawk. Where's it going? What's it doing? How, are they going to go down the same path? What I would really encourage you and everybody else to do is to spend some time on nomadcapitalist.com. There's no affiliation. I don't get any money out of this. I've been following this guy for about 4 years, and I'm now putting into practice some of the things that I've learned through him. Nomadcapitalist.com. And particularly use this search bar and search for flag theory. Flag theory. So FLAG, literally like a flag, right? And what he talks about and what he has done and has helped many other people to do is to plant flags in different countries. So you don't necessarily have to live in the same country where you have the passport. You can have an Australian passport and be living as a resident in another country. There's lots of passports that give you an enormous ability to just simply show up to other countries and say, hey, I would like to live here for a while. And they just stamp your passport and go, hey, come on in, welcome. We're happy to have you. So where you live is not where you have your passport. And it's not necessarily where you have your business set up and registered. And it's not necessarily where you own your investments. You might be investing in other cities, in other countries outside of where you live that isn't where you have your passport or where you live or where you have your business registered. And so you're actually spreading yourself, and planting flags is what he calls it. You're spreading yourself across multiple jurisdictions. And what that means is that when one of those jurisdictions starts to head in a direction that you're not happy with, it's a lot easier for you to extricate yourself from that jurisdiction. If it's the one where you're living, you just simply go to another country where you've got automatic residence. If it's the one where you've got your business registered, you can move the business registration. You can set up a business in another country, move the assets across. It's relatively easy for you to make that next move. I would encourage you to think less of governments as a place where you plant your entire life, and more think of them more like shopping malls. Okay, a government is basically a glorified shopping mall. And let me explain that. If you are a storeholder in a shopping mall, you pay your lease, you pay your rent to be in that particular shopping mall. And in return, that shopping mall provides you with a whole bunch of things. Things that, funnily enough, a lot of people think only a government can provide. But actually, we've got plenty of examples all over Australia of the private sector providing exactly those things. A shopping mall provides roads. They provide parking. They provide cleaning. They provide toilets. Many of them provide playgrounds for kids, public areas, art, public art in common spaces. They provide security. They provide all the things that a state supposedly, if we didn't have the government, we couldn't possibly have any of these things. Well, actually, we've got lots of examples all over Australia and all over the world of all of these things being provided by the private sector. Now, if you owned a chain of stores, well, okay, if you owned one store and you were in a shopping center, I'm not going to name one because it'd be off the top of my head and I don't want to get myself sued for jolly slandering somebody, but you've got one store in a shopping mall. And if that shopping mall goes downhill, they make some bad decisions, they do some bad marketing, they get some bad press, whatever happens, and that shopping mall starts to go downhill, the foot traffic isn't the same, now you're losing money, you've got a big problem, right? You've got to uproot your business from that one location and find another one location to stick it in. But if you've got multiple stores across multiple locations, the pain of moving out of one bad jurisdiction is far lower than if everything is in one bad jurisdiction. So that's the mindset that I would encourage you to have as you think about this stuff. It's not a case of I'm going to take my entire life out of one and into another. It's a case of I'm going to take my entire life out of one and I'm going to spread it across. And Andrew Henderson's slogan is "Go where you're treated best." So that's the nomad capitalist that I've mentioned. Go where you're treated best, and it really resonates with me. And I think it's a very good libertarian / anarchist kind of philosophy. It comes back to, if you're into all the nerdy stuff, it kind of comes back to Ayn Rand and Atlas Shrugged and all that sort of stuff of simply saying I am not being treated well here, and I'm just going to opt out. I'm just going to step out. And just go, you know what, if you're not going to treat me the way that I actually expect to be treated, and I think as a human being I deserve to be treated, then I'm going to go and find somebody that's going to treat me better. Now, again, I'm not running for the door. I'm in Australia. I have no plans to leave Australia yet, but I'm putting in place the mechanisms necessary so that if I have to get out for the sake of my family, so that I don't become that old guy that I was talking to in Caracas, if that day ever comes, I've already got everything in place, and it's not a huge and traumatic thing for me to do. But there's another part to it as well, which is really interesting. And again, this isn't going to make me very many friends. We all pay tax, right? You earn money, you pay tax. It's what is it? It's the price of living. It's the price you pay for living in a civilized country. Well, I would dispute that, but that's the opinion of many people. But every transaction can be viewed in two different ways. So when you pay your tax, right? So the Australian government, let's say you've got two people working in your household and you're both median Australian salary earners. Now, I know because of the research that I did for a video that I released in 2012 that the tax burden in Australia is actually more than 50% for a median Australian salary earner. Now, that's income tax, GST, plus all the other little taxes and fees and registrations and government kind of money that you have to pay out just to be able to live. It's actually in excess of 50%. So if you've got two people earning, I don't know what the median salary is anymore, but let's say 75 grand, it's 150 grand. In the end, you're paying $75,000 a year for the privilege of living in Australia. The cost of your government is $75,000 a year. And if you start to view them not like a government and more like a shopping center, more like the management of the shopping center where you happen to be set up right now, it becomes easier to start to ask yourself, well, what am I getting for my $75,000? What am I actually What am I getting in return for the amount of money that I'm being forced, whether I like it or not, to pay into this particular jurisdiction? And there's a flip side to that equation. So the Australian government is saying to that hypothetical family, they're saying, you need to pay us $75,000 in order to live here through all the different taxes and costs and everything else. You need to pay us $75,000 to live here. Well, there's a flip side to that exact equation, and that is they will pay you $75,000 to leave, right? It's exactly the same equation. But if they're taking $75,000 from you for the privilege of living here, then you'll be $75,000 better off if you don't. Now, that obviously assumes that your income is not location dependent. If you have to show up to a physical location to do your job and it's not something you could do in another place, well, it's a different equation. And one of the things my family have been working on, and my wife and I are working very hard on right now, is location independent income, getting to the point where we can earn our money no matter where we are in the world. Now, not everyone can do that. I recognize that. But for those that can, for those that have a skill set or a profession or what have you that can be done on a laptop, on a computer, this idea of location independent income, once you have that, you then really have to ask yourself, if the government is offering me $75,000 a year to live somewhere else, maybe I should take them up on that offer, right? Maybe I should actually, if that's their deal, maybe I'll take that deal, right? Now, a lot of people say, well, I can't. Okay, I have a job, I have kids in school, I've got family here, I've got whatever. Well, I've got, well, I don't have kids in school. My oldest is not yet in school, but or I'm homeschooling him at home at the moment. He's 5, but we've got family here. All my family is here, apart from one brother who's moved overseas, and all of our income was earned here. Was because we've been slowly migrating and getting other things happening so that we've got location independent income going. But this is where you need to make a decision. We've talked a lot about government, about where their power comes from, about whether they're operating inside their power or whether they are in fact taking whatever power they jolly well please, and there's sweet FA that you can do about it. If you're okay with that, then great. Keep doing what you're doing. Don't work on anything else. Don't work on location independent income. Don't work on a plan B. Don't work on avoiding being that old guy that I met in Venezuela. But for me, for my choice, I am willing to change my entire life. I'm willing to live in a different country. I'm willing to change how I earn my living, and my wife is doing the same thing. I'm willing to change our social networks and the friends that we have and make new friends in order to have the ability to change jurisdictions. And here's why. Here's what gives me the willingness to do that. Number one, I've seen how bad it can get. Now, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know where Australia is going. I'm pretty sure it's not pretty. And I'm hoping, like I said, I'm going to keep fighting, and I'm going to keep on trying to turn it around because I love this country. The more I've traveled, the more I like Melbourne, right? That's been something that I've said countless times in my life. The more I travel around, the more I see of the rest of the world, the more I like it here. Okay, I do. I like it here. But there's a cost to benefit ratio that you have to look at. And I like it here right now, but where are we headed? You know, I'm of the opinion that the Anglosphere, the UK, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, the US, have kind of done, we're kind of doing this at the moment, right? In terms of our freedom, in terms of economically, in terms of even then the lifestyle that will flow out of that, all of that, we're kind of doing this. We're doing it to ourselves, to be clear. There's no inherent reason why that has to be the case, but we're kind of doing that at the moment, especially under COVID. But the rest of the world is this, right? The poorer parts of the world, they're riding on the coattails of the Anglosphere and the Western world and the technology that's been invented, etc. So they're having an easier time doing this. But also, many parts of the world understand tyranny. They lived under it. The former USSR, countries in South America and Central America that have lived under dictators, lived under socialism. A lot of these countries are really discovering, or not discovering, they discovered the pain that comes from giving the government too much power, and they're pushing back more against it than what we are here. There's that saying, hard times breed hard men breed good times breed soft men breed bad times. And I'm very much of the view that the Anglosphere is in that soft men breeding bad times era. That is the phase, the moment in history that we are in. And so it is my choice to have the option the ability to say, I will not be that guy who grows old watching my children suffering because I didn't get a plan B in place.